Welcome everyone to MTG Rebellion State of the Meta. I'm Darth Rictus of the Darkstream, and today we are going to walk through Week 11 of the standard metagame as it moves ever closer to the Wilds of Eldraine release.
I'm Max Damage. Comment below if you have any questions as we navigate through these changes. Now let's untap.
Alright, so Tier 1 arrives with some somewhat predictable results, right? Dimir holds strong at the top still, claiming nearly a quarter of the metagame and top 8 results over the last 2 weeks. Esper Control continues to make appearances, and Domain and Selesnya Enchantress are starting to push back. However, welcome back to the top, Esper Legends. We'll have more on this in a little bit, but suffice to say the latest build for this is hot, and I've already taken it for a spin in Mythic. I think I'm 4-0 right now in the top 1,000 of Mythic with it, so this list is good.
All right, I'm going to have a lot of questions when we get to that deck.
Fair.
Now, while that's the picture in Tier 1, Tier 2 is seeing quite a few shifts as well, with Mono Black, Mono Red, Orzhov Control, and Azorius Soldiers falling by the wayside. With Rakdos Midrange, however, pushing back into the limelight once more, and really to my surprise and shock. So I got to ask you, what before we go into Tier 3, what's going on with Rakdos Midrange? What called for that shift?
So what I saw with Rakdos Midrange was they're going back to the Breach versions. They're going Cruelty of Gixes, Chandras, Breaches, like they're just doing big Rakdos. Kind of like saying, hey, we're going to do what Domain's doing in a way, but we're just going to try and do it in 2 colors and push a better early game than Domain typically has access to because of the limitations with the lands. And I mean, it got me. For those that were watching the Pizza Box, you would have gotten to see that. It was actually round 3's feature match. And yeah, that was brutal. That was rough. And I believe it also was a list that damn near got Darth Zero in the Pizza Box Open as well. And we got to see it top 8, and it was good. It was a good list. So I'm like, all right, it's back to Tier 2 at least if it top 8'd. Because we saw it could really cover ground. But Tier 1, yeah, not quite yet.
Yeah, and to your point, I think that's evidence that we definitely don't do these lists by emotion, right? You had a personal experience with Rakdos Midrange. You professionally kept it at Tier 2 for today. I believe that you are correct in that assessment. While the deck is seeing a comeback, there was a reason it kind of went away, and I suspect that Tier 1 status is going to elude it in coming weeks. But anyways, talk to us about Tier 3.
So Tier 3, I mean, we have the usual suspects plus the remnants of the late great Tier 2 contenders from prior weeks. And I mean, we could go over the fact that all of these have dropped off the radar. We haven't seen a single top 8 for these all week, like for 2 weeks now almost. But we've got a lot of ground to cover. So we're not going to waste a lot of time talking about the lower tiers. The movement up top is where the action's at. So let's just go ahead, kick things off with Esper Legends, and discuss this beauty of a deck that we saw. So roaring back onto the scene by dominating the latest Pizza Box Open, Esper Legends is back, baby. What I love about this list is that it realized Esper Legends can't morph halfway into a mid-range control list. It needs to be the aggro. So you see the return of Thalia at long last to her rightful place. More importantly, check out the 3x to lose Clever Conductor sitting here. I can tell you that I'm a believer. This is the right number to have. As it turns out, all those channel lands, they just turn into reloadable bounce kill spells while maximizing the effect of Rafine and Ronez draw engines. I've literally drawn 8 cards off of 1 to lose in a heated match against Dimir Midrange, and I love where this is positioned right now. I honestly don't bother trying to change cards in the 75. Just upload it, run rampant. Happy hunting, everybody. I love what this is trying to do. It's just back to basics. Good old-fashioned Esper Legends. I fucking love it.
I'm peeping a couple of cards that are different from some of the past builds for Esper Legends. 2 Urtai. I know that's come and gone, whether that was a good main board idea or not. I assume that's there for Sheoldreds, Mono Black, several things that you want to remove and get rid of. Countering the Domain 7-drop spell, usually it's Atraxa. But I want to ask about Wedding Announcement in the sideboard, because I know we've talked, you and me have talked in past, it's been a while, Esper
Sure.
Legends, right? But we've talked about how Wedding Announcement has sort of transformed the deck in some ways. What are we taking out, and what matchups are we looking for to slide in those Wedding Announcements?
So I think Wedding Announcement is going to be a big part of dealing with control decks, where cards like, for instance, Keza, Augur of Agonies, It's just a badly positioned card against control, and to a degree, so is Sheoldred. As much as people hate to hear it, it's still a 4-mana spell, and they have just a plethora of removal. So really, what I look at Wedding Announcement and I see is a way to lower our curve, get under them, and position a certain amount of grind where they have to respect the fact that you can keep pushing momentum and can't just answer it one for one over and over again while getting card advantage every third turn. Because that's what control wants to do. It wants to put you in that pattern. And that's what Wedding Announcement helps to disrupt.
All right, thank you. We're going to keep an eye on Esper Legends, see if it maintains that status into next week, and let us know in the comments if you think this deck is going to fall or if it's going to keep its status. It's been a little finicky, I have to say, in the past few weeks. So I'm happy to see it, but also I have questions.
Right. Time will tell.
But, yeah. Certainly, especially with these really aggressive lists. They definitely come and go. Talk to us about this next list. Dimir Midrange, certainly the poster boy for Tier 1 right now. What's going on?
So there is still plenty of debate on how to build it, but this archetype continues absolute dominance. It smashed through an MTGO challenge this past weekend, including the prior weekends as well. And it placed a copy into the top 8 of the Pizza Box Open. I would like to point out a few shifts within the archetype, though. First of all, this isn't the build that I would necessarily go with, but this is the one that top-aided the Pizza Box, and it's pretty similar to the one that took down the challenge. We're seeing that people are still on a copy of Gix's Command. I actually have really enjoyed Victor Cardarelli's list. I think he ended up in 9th place. Absolutely wrecked me, though, playing 2x Sword of Once and Future in the main. And we're starting to see that main board appearance due to the metagame share that this archetype holds. So be ready for the big bad sword. Second, some art iterations are actually just starting to splash white for an Esper midrange concept, angling to grind through this mirror match with stronger cards for War of Attrition via Wedding Announcement, Wandering Emperor. To me, each of these things, though, is a sign that this archetype has a huge target on its back, and for good reason. It is dominant right now.
Yeah. I just want to reiterate, Sword of Once and Future is good tech. I'm one of the people who started to use that main board, both in mono black aggro and in Dimir Midrange, because that's a very common matchup right now on ladder for me. I'm not sure about the splashing for white into Esper Midrange, but that's a deck that I already have built, is Esper Midrange. But yeah, I can see how the strength of getting close to that easy mana base, Dimir wanting to stretch into a third color, I don't know that that's a great choice. I definitely think the Sword of Once and Future is a great choice. I've been using that with Pilfer to sort of shred my opponent's hand. One deck I'm seeing a lot is Domain, and that's one deck that you that really can't afford to take a lot of hand hate in a lot of instances. So definitely 2 main board, Sword of Once and Future, possibly with a copy of Pilfer. Definitely some duress main board is how I'm running Dimir Midrange. Do you have any tips for the folks at home in addition to that?
I mean, honestly, I think Sword is solid tech for now. This push over to Esper Midrange, I didn't expect to see it, but it ended up in 2nd place at the Pizza Box Open, and it beat out Dimir to get there. And so I looked at it, I looked at the matchups, and it had to beat Dimir several times throughout the day. And what that tells me is that that individual tuned the hell out of it to win that matchup, which means you're gonna sacrifice points in other matchups. You are, but at the same time, when you see, I mean, I've seen multiple people post up their MTGO leagues and challenges where they're playing 5 straight blue-black mirrors, and I'm like, okay, then it's just time to embrace playing swords. It's time to embrace winning Wars of Attrition, and Wedding Announcement and Wandering Emperor still really, really difficult to deal with cards for Dimir. So I can see why they've started to splash into that third color. Not sure it's necessary. I think Sword is just fine. There aren't really clean answers for it. And I can tell you as a mono black player that got ruined by Victor Cardarelli's Sword in the main list, that card is really hard to deal with. So that's where I would go if I'm looking to win against Dimir.
All right, now let's turn it over and talk about Selesnya Enchantress.
So this to me is the metagame gamble of tier 1 archetypes. Selesnya is extremely well positioned against Dimir and mono black typically, but does have struggles with the rising tide of Domain, Esper Control, Azorius Control. It was strong enough to smash into the top 4 of the Pizza Box before falling to Esper Midrange, but will it be here next week at tier 1? Time will tell. In the meantime, Hollowed Haunting and winning the War of Attrition is key currently, So make sure you think long and hard before adjusting the 75 in front of you. Don't get me wrong, I miss Calyx as much as you do. I wish Calyx was a stronger build. I hate that it's a Catilda Resto Hollowed Haunting build instead of a Calyx aggro build, but you got to win the War of Attrition, and mid-range is everywhere. So Hollowed Haunting, Catilda, these are where we're at. Either way, I like this list. I like what it's trying to do. The fact that you see Elish Norns for Domain in the sideboard, the Invasion of Gobakons, and even those 2 copies of Thrun, an acknowledgement that, you know what, we do have a plan for control. It may not be an amazing plan, but we are going to make them find those farewells in short order, or we are going to just run right through them. I like the moxie of that.
I do too. The 4 copies of Catilda, are we hard on those in the main board? And is that possibly a response to a lot of the destroy spells that we're seeing from Mono Black, Dimir Midrange?
I mean, it's a classic 2-for-1 because you are going to, disturb it right out of your graveyard, dump it on top of maybe just a Spirited Companion. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, you've basically gotten 2 Catildas for the price of 1, making those early removal spells that go for the throats, everything else just kind of awkward, and forcing them to have Graveyard Trespasser immediately to mop things up. I like where that's trying to position things. The fact that late game with Hollowed Haunting, Catilda just gets out of control is also a nice benefit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've done that myself. And I just have to remark real quick for the folks at home, this deck is very resilient. I like to play this and Azorius Soldiers as resilience against the board wipes that you often typically see from decks like Domain and whatnot. So this deck's very resilient and has an ability to build back up, especially if you already have 1 or 2 Hollowed Hauntings on the board by the time they wipe your board. But yeah, okay. Speaking of Domain, let's talk about it.
Alrighty, so C. Favretto took his twist on 5-color Domain into the top 8 of the Pizza Box Open, proving the haters wrong for this archetype's ability to win into Dimir Midrange meta. Note the Invasion of New Phyrexia sitting here in the main. That's some spicy tech. The Kami War also sitting in here. Spicy. I like it. That's some great main board tech of the week for Domain. In the sideboard, I think the hottest tech is that there's 2 copies of Obstinate Baloth just sitting here going, all right, we remember what Lily of the Veil is. We all remember the old days where people plus Lily, you dumped Baloth and they cried. And yeah, it's back. It's back. The old tech is now the new hotness. So if you never got to play in those days, just a quick reminder, they tick Lily up, you discard Baloth, Baloth hits the battlefield, you gain 4 life, they cry, you kill Lily with Baloth. It's a beautiful circle of life, really. I'm a huge fan of it. So either way, Kami War being in the main is actually, to me, the biggest part of the tech for this week. Make sure you mess with that. That's where I would be too.
Anything to mitigate one of the most popular 3-drops in the game that became one of the most popular 3-drops over time in the game really snuck up on us, Liliana the Veil, but I dig the tech. Talk to us about some of the other sideboard options. What do you think about Tyrannix? What do you think about those heavy-handed sort of plays, the 3 of in the sideboard? Is that a good sideboard piece, or perhaps maybe more Kami War? What do you think should be in that slot?
I don't love Tyrannix Rex. I get why people love the T-Rex. I still believe that these control matchups will have Sheoldred's Edicts. They will have ways to interact with it. To me, it's still a little bit sloppy, and it speaks to I'd rather get lucky than play tight. And that's why I don't love it, because I think you do need a certain amount of Lux for a T-Rex to take down a game, whereas, Thrun by itself, I think, is just already a stronger choice because it's harder to interact with, it's harder to deal with, it rewards more tight play. But, as much as I can hate on it, you get to a top 8, you get there for a reason. So, lucky or not, the T-Rex is here for this week.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, got to show what's actually getting play. I love it. Domain, one of those ones I love to tinker with, love to play with. I personally like Wedding Announcement in the main board. There's so many variations on the deck now. It's hard to throw a rock, you're gonna hit a different variation of Domain.
Right.
But all right, now definitely last but certainly not least, we need to talk about Esper Control. Has this deck shifted any of its tech, and what around?
So Esper Control's been a little bit more quiet of late. It quietly took a couple top 8 slots between the Pizza Box Open and the MTGO Challenge over the weekend. And to me, the sole innovation here is the higher number of Planeswalkers to help win the Grindfest it subjects opponents to. So it feels like this deck actually might be close to falling to tier 2 lately with the rise of Dimir Midrange, and I would not be surprised if it fell off entirely in future weeks because of Dimir Midrange and that back and forth where they just have a little bit more flexibility with their game plan than you do. And you have a little bit more clunkiness in your game plan than they do, you know? And that's, I see pieces of that here, but I think this is the rise of Dimir signals why we're seeing less Siphon Insight, because there isn't as much time to play that war of attrition back and forth with Siphon Insight. You need walkers that have effects when they hit so that you can actually mitigate the snowball effect that Dimir Midrange likes to push with Kaito and with Gix.
Here's my bias take. My personal bias take is I love seeing less of that card. I think, right, to me, my criticism of it, aside from just no gameplay concerns, just a flavor criticism, is it doesn't call for players to be very creative. Come up, I'm always like, come up with your own win con when somebody tries to steal mine. But anyway, I love seeing that shift. Less Siphon Insights. It tells me that Control is feeling a little bit of a pinch, feeling a little bit of pressure. So we'll see. We'll keep an eye on it coming weeks, see if it drops down. If it doesn't, let us know in the comments what you think. But speaking about the community, let's go ahead, if you're ready, and jump into our Brewers Corner.
So up first, Boss Level is the screen name that took this to a 5-0 in a standard challenge, and it's Naya tokens, which I haven't seen this. This is some spice. I like what they're trying to do, and I think a lot of people have forgotten that this Ginny Faye card is kind of nuts if it sits. Like, if you play tokens and this is sat around for a turn, you're going to have so many hasty cats or 3/1 dogs with vigilance. It's just kind of nuts. I mean, imagine rabble rousing here, where you're going to create how many fucking creatures? Quite a few probably with this, and they're all going to come in as 2/2s or 3/1s with vigilance. That's nuts. So this is definitely a snowball deck. Like, if it gets going, good luck stopping it. But if it doesn't get going, it's probably pretty easy to hold in check. I don't know. It feels very high risk. What do you think, Max?
I think this deck is ready for a control dominant meta, and I think that's why it was created, to outlast a deck like, the mid-range, Dimir mid-range, but also Esper Control. I love some of these are my pet cards, especially Jetmir. Like, I was always, when Jetmir came out, I was always trying to find different ways to build around Jetmir and make it work. And this is definitely one of those decks that you let their threats stick, it'll sneak up on you and just pound you in like the 5th turn, and you have no choice but to really answer the threats. So I like it. I like the pressure that it puts out.
Fair. Moving right along here, though, we have a fun little brew. This is a variation on a brew that was given to us, and Darth Zero took this Mardu Robots list all the way to the top 8 of the Pizza Box this past weekend. So this, to me, is the brew of the week. I know the original iteration was Rakdos. This one splashes white for Path of Peril, which saved Darth Zero's ass multiple times throughout the day. So that's why we're going to call it Mardu Robots instead of just Rakdos with a little splash, because that white was key for a number of matchups. Either way, what this deck can do that very few other decks can do is a turn 5 Cityscape Leveler. And that's really terrifying to a lot of people when, they can, and it's easy. You can go literally a Gix's Caress, snag their best card, get a Power Stone, Might Stone, Weak Stone, kill a Shelly, Cityscape, blow up their biggest threat. Just like that. Just boom, boom, boom. 3, 4, 5.
Wow.
So
any way to use Might Stone, Weak Stone to really... God, I remember the Jeskai build around Might Stone, Weak Stone, where people were using it to pop Urza, and then they just dropped Urza and were just using it to bring out stuff like Skitterbeam Battalion.
Right.
But in this case, Cityscape Leveler, that's a hard card to respond to with it not being killable by Go for the Throat, especially. So,
and if you add an automated Artificer to that equation on turn 2, and they don't deal with that either, then you can get Portal to Friction on turn 5. That's the extra mana, which I don't know if you've ever tried to plow through Portal to Friction, but if it resolves and sits for a turn, pretty much always GG's from what I've seen.
Yeah, it really is. It's happened. It's happened to me. I've experienced that firsthand, actually. But Let us know what you think of these decks. If you try them out, if you make any adjustments to them, let us know in the comments. And let us know while you're down there what you think of the Brewers Corner in general. You can submit deck lists to us. Point out some decks that you would like to see featured down there in the comments. While you're down there, like and subscribe. All right. So, Rictus, do we have any final thoughts or predictions on this week's standard?
Honestly, my prediction for the weekend is we are going to see Dimir Midrange lists shift to include the Sword of Once and Future while pushing some Glistening Deluge for Enchantress into the sideboard and perhaps some additional early removal to help with the rise of Esper Legends. I don't see Dimir Midrange or Dimir Aggro, however you want to call it, falling by the wayside anytime soon. It has all the tools to focus on any archetype and just hate it out. But as we're edging closer to that tier 0 territory for them, you have to remember the diversity in the format is keeping it at bay, because it isn't like rock, paper, scissors, and then Dimir just focuses on 2 other decks and that's the end of it. There's like 5 or 6 viable decks here. We're seeing 5 in tier 1 alone and some other ones that are rising, some weird brews, etc. And Dimir doesn't have unlimited sideboard space from which to choose that arsenal. So I think Dimir Midrange will continue to dominate, but people that brew and brew hard will be rewarded because Dimir won't have the tools to respond to everything. But Max, what about you? Any predictions for this upcoming weekend?
Yeah, I do believe I concur about Dimir Midrange being on the rise, possibly touching just that tier 0 status if it can. But I also see a response by the meta. I think week to week we've been surprised by some of the shifts, and I see aggro coming back on the rise as a response to some of the things that have occurred recently. Domain being in the spotlight definitely is a call for aggro.
Right.
So we'll see. It might, and if that does occur, I think we'll see Esper Control fall out of the tier 1 status, and we might even see something like Soldiers or Mono Red or Mono Black come back on the rise. So one of those 3 decks I think will reach tier 1 probably after the week's end and the week's events. Those are my predictions. But let us know what you think in the comments. What are you going to say?
I honestly, there's been a ton of people that have gone on, Twitter, X, whatever you call it, and they're like, oh, Dimir Midrange is cracked. That's the end of the format. I'll see you at Wilds of Eldraine. And to those people, maybe take a little bit more time. Think about where this format's going, because I don't think this format's solved. I think this is one of the best standards we've had in a while. There's a lot of diversity. Yeah. Yes, I would have preferred that they banned a few more cards. It would have been nice to get rid of Shelly. It would have been nice to get rid of Atraxa, Wandering Emperor, all those staples. But the format, there's like 5 or 6 decks that I can comfortably play in Mythic right now, and that is a very uncommon thing to see in Standard. So personally, I think we're just fine. I think it's healthy. Wilds of Eldraine looks fucking nuts. I can't wait to see the rest of that thing spoiled and out so that we can play with all the new tools.
Oh yeah, me too. I can't wait for that early access. That's gonna be fun. Oh man. But let us know what you think down there in the comments. Like and subscribe. And from all of us in the MTG Rebellion, don't forget, untap, upkeep, resist.